Ding, ding, ding. Recording. Oh, where did that come from?
It's been around a while. I don't know.
He must have heard he got rowdy last. Playing travel baseball.
Yeah. All right, folks, welcome to the June meeting of the Conservation Commission. We've got two guests here already and a third expected. So Caitlin Cusack from Vermont Land Trust is here. And Kai, our neighbor, Baston's here. And Brian Voigt is expected too. So two special items. Caitlin's going to talk about options for emerald ash borer kind of treatment, and Brian's going to give us an update on the engineering study on the floodplain reconnection opportunity. And then we have some of our usual things. So that's the plan. Don't see any public here except for Kai. Do you have any things to say in the public part of the meeting?
I do not. I'm just here to listen to Caitlin and Brian and see what you guys are up to.
And chime in whenever you feel like it.
Okay.
Please. Please. All right. Well, Caitlin, you're on already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Well, it's nice to see everyone. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've been talking to Kurt a little bit about is that I wanted to make sure you all were aware of is some options when thinking about how do we make sure we have ash in our future, right? Emerald ash borer. And I'm happy for this to be informal. So as there are questions, just kind of fire away and I can answer what I can. And if I can't answer it, I'll find the answer for you. How's that? So a couple of things that we're thinking about when we think about what are the strategies for in the face of emerald ash borer. We have silvicultural strategies, which are being employed in different ways on the landscape. There are biocontrols. So there are 3 different wasps. 2 of them lay their eggs in the larva of emerald ash borer. 1 lays their eggs in the eggs. And they're being released in a couple different sites in the state. They tend to only protect smaller diameter trees because their ovipositors are pretty small. And so they can't really, if you think of how ash bark can get pretty thick. So our larger trees aren't necessarily, I think jury's still out if biocontrols are actually going to protect them in the long run. But there's a couple other options we have in thinking about how do we think for ash being in our future. And one thing we're doing is these insecticide treatments. And so there's an organic option out there, but I haven't heard of many people using it. So there is a chemical option. It's called emamectin benzoate. And so the state of New Hampshire is way ahead of us, and they have protected thousands of trees. And the goal here is to really protect genetic, in some cases, cultural diversity. Think of ash, like all the ecological benefits of ash, the economic value of ash, and then the cultural value, particularly black ash to the Abenaki and throughout all of its range, all the indigenous folks that ash is so important. And so what they're doing in New Hampshire and what we're doing in Vermont is protecting, we call them preservation patches. And I can there's a great publication that Tony D'Amato and Paul Catanzaro put out called, managing in the face of emerald ash borer. And this is, they use the term preservation patches. And so this option is based on some research they did in the Allegheny National Forest that looked at, okay, how do we conserve the genetics of ash, right? And so they looked at, do we conserve a whole bunch of trees in a small number of locations, or do we preserve kind of smaller numbers of trees, but in many different locations? And so it was the smaller number of trees in many different locations that if you did that on a landscape scale, you can preserve a good portion of the genetics. And so Green Mountain National Forest, the state, the Land Trust, the Nature Conservancy are all doing these preservation patches. So we've got 10 different properties. The Land Trust owns, Equinox Preservation Trust. The town of Heinsberg protected a handful of trees in their town forest. Town of Williston has a preservation patch in the Catamount Community Forest. And so I just wanted to make this information. TNC they've got preservation patches in 4 of their preserves, which is great to have TNC because their preserves have black ash and green ash. So a lot of our lands just have white ash. But in order to kind of think about black ash being the most vulnerable and the most culturally important species, it's great to have, when you can protect black ash, to be able to protect it. So that's one thing that I just wanted to make you aware of, and particularly the town of Williston, ArborJet, who makes the chemical that is able to protect the trees. They have a Protecting America's Iconic Trees program, and so they paid for the treatment in the Williston Town Forest. Otherwise, it's probably about $10 to $12 per diameter inch to protect a tree. And you do that treatment every 3 years. And so, you know, I know towns and communities are treating trees in their downtowns. I know Rutland has a giant ash that they're protecting. Some folks, sounds like, are protecting trees in their yards. And this is just another option for woodland owners who, you know, it can sometimes feel hopeless when you have a pest like this that threatens, like ash could go extinct. Like, it's really that dire, but to have, you know, an action that one can take to be able to think about long term. So that's one option that, given the town forests, could be something, you know, you might want to think about. And then the other one is, they are finding there is resistance in the populations of ash species. And they call it, I don't know if you've heard of the term lingering ash, but these are trees that they may eventually die, so they're not completely bulletproof. But you have a given group of trees, and they will live 2 to 3 years beyond all the rest of the trees dying in that area. And they're then breeding those trees. And so if you have a lingering ash that is bred with a lingering ash, you're gonna increase the resistance of our native species. And so they're doing this work down in North Carolina and Ohio. They have tree breeding programs. And so there's a monitoring program you can set up. They're called mama plots, monitoring ash mortality plots, where you choose 40 trees, and you say, you know, we're not gonna cut them, we're not gonna do anything, we're just gonna let them live out their lives, but we're gonna come in every year and we're gonna monitor their health. And, you know, it's important to do this before they start dying. So, you know, this area, we're still in a good place, I think. I haven't seen widespread mortality yet. Here, up in the islands, I think they're starting to reach that tipping point where they're seeing a lot of mortality, but here, you set up the plot and you just monitor it every year, and you choose those 40 trees. And then as you start to see symptoms and decline, then you may be able to identify a resistant or a lingering ash in that group. And so there are a number of some private landowners, some towns, TNC setting up some plots. We have some plots on our lands. And just thinking about that as another option, maybe for that floodplain forest stand, maybe who knows what access to that is, you know, going to be challenging anyway. So maybe there are opportunities like that on town lands to do that. And it's a great citizen science, you know, volunteers can be trained very easily to do it. I mean, gosh, you could probably even get the schools, you know, engaged in that. So, and, you know, Chase Brook Tukai, you know, right across from the school, that would be a fun, can't remember how much ash is in there, but.
Spotty in there.
Yeah. So yeah, those are, I guess, 2 programs and approaches just to be aware of. And, you know, there are resources for, you know, each of those kind of support, either VLT or other individuals in the state that can provide training or support in that piece of it. Yeah.
What's the actual treatment physically? What is done?
Yeah, so it's called ArborJet Quick Jet Air. And so you drill a hole in the tree, you put a plug in, and then it looks like a giant needle. And the chemical is basically injected under 80 PSI into the tree. So it's very quick. I think they have some of these other injection systems that the tree has to naturally uptake the chemical, which can take a while. What's great is there's no pesticide drift, because you're injecting it directly into the tree. Yep. And the question, you know, concern is always about wounding when you're putting that many, because you measure the diameter of the tree and then divide it by 2, and that's the number of holes you need to put into the tree. So you end up putting a lot of holes in the tree, but you know, ideally you're choosing vigorous growing trees. And I'm now on my 2nd round, and there are so many trees that have pushed that plug out and have just like sealed over. So it really depends though, because there are some trees where you see the wounds, and there's another, equipment called the rainbow injection system that doesn't require a plug. And I know there are other folks that have used that one. The quick jet air is just the system we have. But yeah. And so
You inject it and then you stick a plug?
yeah, so you put the plug in, you drill a hole, then you put the plug in, and then the needle goes into the plug. So the plug is like the receptacle for the needle, and it seals the hole so the chemical doesn't come back out. So it kind of stays in the tree, and then the tree, has time to take it up, and it will distribute throughout the tree. So you do that every 3 years.
Do you need vehicular access? I'm assuming that'd be difficult to do on foot. Unless it's
So-
low volumes of pesticide.
No, it's not built for, I mean, the kit itself is probably, it's in a bag that's about this big. And yeah, I mean, it's for like going up to shade trees, but I have a colleague of mine had an old A-frame pack.
No.
So I can attach it to the A-frame and then I can put it on my back.
Okay.
So it is possible to kind of hike it into areas. I mean, it's not the lightest thing, but it is, yeah, it's possible.
What volume of pesticide would you use?
Yeah, so it's 4 milliliters per injection site.
Okay.
And then that's every 3 years. The Forest Service says you can go 4 years. I've been a little more conservative, but if you were to hire a contractor, they would say every 2 years, but you can go 3 to 4 years
4 millimeters for each.
for each
One shot.
injection site. Yeah. Yeah, and then that will protect the tree for that period of time. You just monitor it,
Don't have to be a licensed applicator,
you do.
you do,
Yeah, it is a restricted chemical,
so.
Can't buy it without it, right?
right?
Average person can't do it.
Right. So there are a number of applicators in the state that have been doing this.
This is a new side business for you?
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, thank you. But I do it for VLT. Yeah.
Could you do it for Waitsfield?
Yeah, well, so that's one thing we
Yeah.
did with Williston
Mhm,
is my license is non-governmental, so I can only treat on properties owned by VLT. I couldn't treat it on, we looked into, well, does an easement count? Like, is that, but yeah, the state's pretty, I guess rigid with that. But what I can offer is to lend our equipment, like we've lent our equipment to Heinsberg and Williston. The trick is I guess the county foresters don't have the right license either to treat on town lands, so you then run into the issue where, it ends up needing to be a professional applicator, commercial
You have a
applicator.
licensed applicator in town or that works for the town?
There are licensed applicators in town, but I'm not one of them.
No.
But yeah, that would work too. So, if they could buy the chemical for the town, I will bring my equipment, I will show them how to do it. We can do it together, but technically we need to have a licensed applicator there, that's the town's.
What's
That
actually
would
in
work.
this, what's actually in this stuff? You have to have a
Yeah,
license to.
Yeah.
buy it, everything,
yeah, I mean, it's an insecticide, it's a chemical, yep, it will, and it's not targeted to EAB, so it kills a whole broad range of insects that, including moths and butterflies so anything that feeds on that tree that's in this group of insects will die. But the thought is, if you have, and since ash or dioecious, meaning they have male and female trees, if you protect 75% females, since they're wind pollinated, you don't need that many males. And then the goal here is we have then a reproducing population on the landscape. And so it's, and I think it's hard, right? Like I went through the cost benefit. Okay, we've got this, insecticide. I don't like to apply chemicals. I know but it can be helpful and cost effective in some cases. And here it's like, okay, we can keep a reproducing population of ash in the landscape, but we are going to kill anything that feeds on it. So yeah, it's a cost up. You have to weigh that, cost benefit.
Anything that feeds on it, what do you, bear?
No, it's insects. Yeah.
Now, the other question,
At this dose, it's just insects.
now the
yeah.
other question is, how do you tell the male from the female?
Yeah, no, it is harder than I thought, but when you see the seeds. They don't produce, a heavy crop of seeds every year. They're not gonna reproduce every year, but every 2 to 3 years, when they have a seed year, you can identify the females really easily by looking at the seeds, particularly in the fall, you'll see the seeds. Some people, I don't know, can you identify between the flowers? I could not tell difference between male and female flowers at that distance, but
Yeah.
don't you?
Me either, never tried
Yeah.
that. Seeds is a go-to.
So that's a hope, yeah. Yeah.
Does this treatment go on indefinitely?
Yeah, I think we don't know how long, but I think. And I think that was, another thing, we're treating them, as long as we can.
Yeah,
And we'll, eventually collect seed from them. And, it's hard to know how long it's gonna take, right, for these waves of emerald ash borer to have an impact.
yeah.
Yeah,
So we're talking about $12 per diameter inch per tree,
per tree,
every couple to
every 3 years.
3 years plus or minus.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you're interested in that option, I mean, it could be worth checking with, ArborGet to see if they would do the saving on America's iconic trees, because then their tech person that covers the Northeast brings the equipment and they have.
Now, you said something about saving seeds.
Yeah, so that's something that we haven't really done a lot of in Vermont, but we're talking in the intervale about. Could they, because they're, always collecting seeds for a lot of their floodplain nursery species. And riparian restoration work. And so we've talked to them, they said it wouldn't be too hard for us to add ash seed collection to their protocol. So there's a lot of different options of thinking about one, collecting seed, but also, talk to them about, could they be a breeding center for lingering ash? And so that's, once we identify these lingering ash, and there are a couple actually in can't remember the name of the wildlife management area, but they think they've actually identified up there near the islands, a population of that more than one tree that's black ash that's lingering. And so could the intervale then be brought in to do some of the tree breeding for that? And a lot of, I guess, some of the limitation with tree breeding is having the rootstock. And so even if they were able to develop a bunch of rootstock, that then the lingering ash could just be, the science could be attached to that, and that could be so there's a lot, I think there's a lot with seed saving, but.
Yeah, we know.
So, some of good,
Yeah.
I just.
Gail has a question.
Lean to
Yeah.
Caitlin.
Yeah.
Hi, can you say a little bit more about the wasps and what potential costs, and besides the diameter of the tree or the thickness of the trunk of the bark, what just to compare the two types of control?
Yeah. Well, the WASP, the state and the federal government have been really managing that program. So it's not something that is necessarily something a municipal or a private landowner would be involved with at this point. But what I understand is, in order to identify these wasps, they have to do research in their native range, and then they have, closed field trials to make sure they don't become invasive. And then so they've identified these 3. And I know the state has permits and has been able to get some wasp to release. I know one release site in Orange County, there might be another couple. But it's still early. And I think part of the one is, it seems like they're not able at this point to protect larger trees because of the bark thickness. But also, I think there's also a question with some of these biocontrols of, can they withstand our winters? And I know that's been a problem with the hemlock woolly adelgid biocontrol. And so I'm not, I'll look into that though, Gail, whether that's another, because that's another kind of issue that may or may not be happening with these biocontrols. But I think it may be availability too, or I'm not exactly sure why there's not more release sites. I think part of it is, you need to have enough prey there for those wasps to get established. And we just may not be seeing enough concentration of EAV yet in Vermont to support those, parasites. But I'd be happy to look into that more, because it's not something I have direct experience with, but I could find out more info from the state as to what the plan is, you know, and do we see, you know, releasing more biocontrols on the landscape, and could a town or a private landowner at some point, you know, have a release site on their land? I'm not sure what their long-term plan is, but.
What
Got
about
it.
the
Oh, it's
one
still
in-
highly experimental stage. It's not a widespread, there's not widespread use.
No, I should ask them though about New Hampshire. I feel like New Hampshire is a little more ahead of us in terms of this treatment and potentially with release of biocontrols, so. You know, and when I talk to the Vermont folks, I can get a sense of, you know, where New Hampshire's at, and is that where we're headed to, but, yeah.
Thanks.
Back to the insecticide approach,
Yeah.
Has there been much public dialogue about that in different places that have been trying the treatments, either with you all or with TNC, the state, the feds, or particularly the other towns? And if so, any takeaways from the public dialogue?
Yeah, I know that is obviously a really sensitive subject, you know, particularly here. And you know, I would say we haven't, I mean, we talk about it in our like publications and whatnot, but we haven't hosted, you know, community meetings necessarily about it. And I don't think that I'm aware of Heinsberg or Williston has outside of their town forest committee. But from what I understand, I mean, they shared about it in their e-newsletter, we shared about it on social media. And to my knowledge, there hasn't been a huge or much in the way of concern about that, which is interesting. But so yeah, Phil, we haven't yet had much yeah, dialogue or concern about it besides, you know, sharing about what we're doing and yeah.
Okay, thanks.
How effective is it, Caitlin? If you keep treating the tree, is it always gonna live, or is it more effective sometimes?
From what I understand, I mean, it should protect, I mean, there are other things that can obviously kill ash trees. But that this is known to, at this concentration, they've done enough research that these trees should be protected. And particularly, you know, one of the scientists, Nate Seeger, who's kind of leading researcher on emerald ash borer, he really thinks, you know, as long as these trees are protected during the height of pest pressure, once pest pressure drops, a lot of these trees should be able to stand a low level of emerald ash borer activity. I mean, that's not tried yet, right? Like we haven't experienced this long enough to test that, but that's, you know, an interesting idea. And, you know, maybe with combination of biocontrols and we protect trees now, maybe that's kind of in the long run. I think just nobody knows what this is gonna look like, because EAV is not gonna ever go away. It's gonna, once the host drops, right, that population is gonna drop. But what they're seeing, these second wave where you have, you know, EAV can kill an ash tree down to 1 inch in diameter. So you'll have regen in the understory, small, so it misses the first wave. But then in Ohio and Michigan, once it grows into that larger age class, then that gets hit. So it's hard to know what this is gonna look like. And these are places I understand that don't have biocontrols. So maybe if there were, that phenomena wouldn't necessarily happen. But I think that the goal now is just trying to keep as many eggs in the basket as we can. You know, we're in a different place than we were with Dutch elm disease. We're certainly in a much different place than we were in chestnut blight hit. Like, let's not cut them all, right? Let's let resistance express itself, right? It's out there, right? Let's breed so we have resistant trees to plant back into the landscape. Let's have reproducing populations on the landscape. When we are doing forest management, let's regenerate ash. Like, let's create bigger openings so that we can get some ash established. And so I think it's just trying to create this like multi-pronged approach to figure out, can we like keep the species here, like in the long term? It's just, but a lot of this is just, we just don't know.
Yeah.
What, you know, what will happen, but we're trying to kind of, try different things to keep different ages and different techniques.
And to protect a tree that's already infected, you're saving a compromised tree. You want to probably get the tree before it was even infected. So if you're finding infection in a forest, you find the ones that don't have any symptoms and try to, would you treat an infected tree?
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand from ArborJet, the folks, you can, if a tree has been already attacked, you can still protect it if it's less than. I have to double check this, but I wanna say it's like even something like 30% crown dieback. The tree, if you inject it, the tree will still be able to survive, even if it's already been started to be attacked. But once-
30% ground.
Even that, I mean, I think, but ideally, to your point, you're choosing trees that are vigorous, that are healthy, that haven't been attacked yet, to get the insecticide in the tree before it gets attacked, so that anytime, so that when EAV arrives and starts feeding on that tree, it's not gonna get anywhere. Because the tree's already protected. Yeah,
You know, I think the tree board here in Waitsfield is in the midst of developing a plan. And I think it's mostly to remove the ash, especially along roadways, but I think it would be helpful. And then I think the new town administrator has asked the Conservation Commission to kind of comment on the tree board plan. So I think this might be a nice opportunity to talk with them and for you to share with them, and maybe some folks in the select board, you know, these options. There's a lot of ash in Waitsfield
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
and some beautiful ash that, you know, in our part of our new town forest, as you know.
Mhm.
Well, there's no way to get rid of the bug himself, right?
Unfortunately,
You know, any COVID shots?
no COVID, this is the COVID shot, yeah, this is the inoculation, yeah. I mean, it's interesting when you think about back in like,
It's the
When it first
antibiotic, I
arrived.
guess, what it is, right?
Yeah.
The antibiotic.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they first thought in some pests, you can kind of do this quarantine, they would find where EAB was, and then they would do these quarantine zones where they would cut a half mile up to 2 miles. They tried to cut every ash tree within that area to try and be like, okay, we're gonna starve it out. But the problem was the bug was already like 10 miles away, and so there was just no way, because it will, if it has a host, it will stay there, but it can fly, gosh, up to, I guess, 2 miles a year, and it needs some search, so. I think that, yeah, there's different, I think they tried some different things like that early on, but yeah, fortunately, that was not. I think they were trying also these like trap trees, there's a small reduction. Like if we take all the big ones, then that will really get most of it maybe, and maybe that will drop the population, but that didn't. that
Right,
panning out.
they were doing big girdling efforts to get the pheromones out that attract bugs into that area.
Yeah, and then you cut them and remove them, but yeah, there was no way to really get them all, because they weren't all gonna just, lay their eggs in that, so yeah. Tried a lot, I mean, I will say Vermont, we're at least at this, for this one, we're at the end of the line, right? Like unfortunately, poor Ohio and Michigan are just, they have no ash trees, like because it was detected at a point where the research, they didn't have time to get this research or try some of these techniques. So I think that, at least in the Northeast, we're in a position where we maybe have some other tools or options that we can try. That just Michigan and Ohio didn't have.
When they first detected out there, do you remember? Ooh,
1,000,
Right in there, yeah.
yeah, but it already
So
been
it's-
there 12 years before they found it, so.
It had
and-
Mhm.
Yeah,
But so like in the span of 30 years, their ash has been wiped out because they weren't in a position of knowing much about it, what to do to
Yeah.
try to stave it off.
Around 10 years ago, it was sort of the end of the first wave, and there was 5% of survival rate
yeah,
in that area.
yeah. There was one
And-
paper that talked about, there were some stands that they knew in Michigan, EAB had been there. And there was 75% survival of white ash. And they can't explain it, they don't know why, they were like, were these trees just. The pests just moved on, they missed them, or is there some reason, they don't know, but that gives me hope.
Right. But the 5% that were hanging around after the first wave, what I'm hearing is they're not necessarily surviving
The second wave,
later
once
waves.
Once they get to
Yeah.
the larger size classes, yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you happen to recall how long it takes ash to produce viable seed from a seedling. And
I wanna say
Does it have to
20
be-
years.
20 years,
I think I'm remembering that 20 years. I mean, they say like 8 to 10 inches diameter. That's typically,
now, I was thinking that the species may survive if it produces seed at a diameter that's too small to indicate to attract the borer. It's like elm. Elm will grow up and hedgerows along the roadside, but it produces seed early and it will also sprout stumps. So the species keeps you regenerating. It's just that it doesn't get very big. So I wonder if this same thing might happen to ash.
yeah, it's
I don't
interesting.
think so.
Yeah,
From what you said, it
yeah,
would be too big at age 20.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. It'll tack down to 1 inch, but yeah, I mean,
What do we
So
need
folks
to-
have some thoughts about any next steps here? And one thing that's also going on, Caitlin, we're in the midst of kind of expanding the management plan for Wool Edges and the fairgrounds property. So I guess that might be one opportunity to consider, the options you've laid out. And I think engaging the tree board folks, I think, kind of makes sense. So they're aware of, there are other possibilities here than
Mhm.
kind of preventive cutting, I think is what they're thinking.
Good.
This is pick your battle decision, pick your places.
Caitlin, are you looking at management plans of BLT parcels, or are you just leaving it up to the foresters who are doing the management plans to incorporate practices to treat ash, or what are you, how are you directly involved with the whole ash issue on BLT lands?
certain lands, yeah, I mean, the foresters, so David, Peter and I, we have to review and approve all management plans before any harvesting happens. So that's a point where, we review, and when Brandon sent me the draft for the new parcel and the ledges, I kind of had a conversation with him about some of the language around ash management, and so that's one way that we're kind of having a dialogue with consulting foresters about how are we thinking about and talking about ash, and how do we use some of these strategies, particularly obviously within forest management plans and silvicultural strategies, talking about like, we're not taking them all, we're leaving kind of all age classes, we're trying to regenerate ash when we can, managing the forest ecosystem versus managing the pest. So there's that, and then we had a great webinar by Tony D'Amato and Paul Catanzaro, where they talked about these different strategies and gave some examples where they're employing some of the silvicultural strategies for thinking about keeping ash on the landscape. And so, yeah, sort of some of the education, and then just kind of information sharing. But it's a huge range, right, of what we see on private land. There's a huge range of landowner goals, right, on private land. And so it does range in terms of how folks are addressing it. But the current use does have a policy statement around ash and if someone is going to do a salvage harvest, there are requirements of when that is appropriate, when that might not be appropriate. So, county foresters as well, obviously in dialogue with the forestry community about this. Yeah.
So any other thoughts before we wrap up this item?
Yeah, it seems like, well,
Go ahead.
no.
No, you go ahead, that's right.
It sounds like it would make sense to have some dialogue with the tree board, as you're suggesting us, and ideally, Caitlin, you're the one, well, maybe Chris and Leo, who know most about this among this circle. And then for us to be thinking about it as we move forward on developing a management plan for Wool Edges. of, what kinds of steps we want to fold into the plan there, building on what we've got
Mhm.
from, and then I guess from there it would be also maybe in parallel, I don't know, but thinking about, is there anything that we want to be doing up at Scrag? Which, we're not in a management planning cycle, but that doesn't necessarily constrain us from thinking about what's happening up there for forest management, among other things.
So maybe Woo Fairgrounds could be a chance to kind of learn our way into it and, think through the different options and the ramifications of those. And that could then help us think more comprehensively about it, maybe.
And what type of treatment, if you're gonna have treatment, are you gonna be
Exactly.
looking into it? And if you were gonna have treatment, where would you want to even attempt to
Right.
do it?
Right, I think that's a key question, is like,
Yeah.
where is our ash, and do we have some of the pockets that we might want to focus on?
I think also if we are going to explore that avenue for management, we need to understand how we want to phrase what it is we're actually doing by trying to save these trees,
Mhm.
right? It's not economically viable, right? You can't possibly get that money back in those particular trees, or potentially even in their offspring, right? So there's a public benefit, civic benefit, there's some other ecosystem benefits of doing this, and we have to explain that if we're going to try to implement something,
Mhm.
what are we actually doing? What's our
Right.
cost and benefit to doing it? And articulate that, because it's not gonna be easy to get. If we choose to do something that promotes pesticide use on public land, we are gonna get pushback. Guaranteed. And so we need to understand whether it makes sense for us to even start that discussion.
Just gonna comment on the great orderliness of nature. Sometimes there's great disorder. And you find organisms that don't fall to epidemics and plagues and outbreaks, and they survive it. That's how many organisms have evolved, is that all their neighbors get killed off by a common enemy, and those that didn't evolve to survive this attacking organism. You said in Michigan, there are vast areas with no ash. Nothing, and nobody's found somebody out there that is still green and.
Oh, I mean, probably, Leo, but I mean, in terms of pretty high mortality, like
Yeah.
90 plus, I'm sure, percent mortality that's with ash, but sure, I would totally agree with you. Yeah, there's gotta be,
It's gonna be.
yeah.
There'll be some out there. To me, that's the real hope for the future. In a way, you have to start over again. You lose all your cattle. You have to bring in some from somebody else's herd and start over again. But to me, the business, the treatment of injecting chemicals, people will do that for a while, but not for extended periods. So there's gonna be something out there that will ensure the survival of the species through natural processes, not man-made alterations. I think that's why I put my money long term.
Okay, well, thanks so much for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're welcome to stay.
Nice to
if
see
you'd
you.
like. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
You've got a-
I
you've
have
got a little one.
6-year-old,
You've got a
I have
little
6-year-old
one.
that I know is like,
Okay,
he
okay.
said, I'll be home by 8.
So you're gonna
Look at the clock.
elect to go home.
Yes, I will.
Okay, good, good.
Yeah. Nice to visit.
Nice to see you.
Yeah,
To
you
see you
too, and
again.
I'll send you a couple, resources on the mama
Right.
plots if you're curious. I know
Good.
Tony Paul's
Yeah, right.
webinar is really
Wonderful, okay.
informative, so,
Right.
yeah, well, thank
All
you
right.
for having me. Yeah,
Okay.
being part of this
Good to see
discussion.
you.
so-
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for
Right.
what you do, Caitlin.
Yeah, yeah.
Just keep the maple trees going.
I know. Well, yeah, that is a true, right?
And then we got some other thing, the oak leaf something.
Yeah.
I
I
know.
know, I keep reading the booklet on all of the ones that are out there, it's scary.
All right, Gail, we're ready for the minutes.
Okay, bye-bye.
Brian, Jason's good.
I'll have all that.
Oh, I think- Yeah.
Already 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a different license.
Gail, you ready for the minutes?
Yes. Did everyone get a chance to look at them? Does anyone remember that meeting?
The minutes, yes.
I wasn't present on that. I don't think either.
Yeah.
So I'll move that we accept the meetings as drafted, the minutes as
All
drafted.
right,
I'll second.
second, James, any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay, good. All right, thanks. So Brian, you're up.
Thanks, Kurt. Hi, folks.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for making some space on the agenda. Hi, everyone. I think I know everybody in the room, but I'm Brian Voigt, Senior Planner at the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. And I'm just back here tonight to give you an update on some work that we're doing through our Clean Water Service Provider program. You probably recall I was around a few months back talking about some project development work on municipal properties along the Mad River. We hired a consultant, Watershed Consulting, to come out and do the project development work with us. And myself, the consultant, Kurt, Ira from Friends of the Mad River, and his new assistant, and also Kenny Perot, all joined for the field trip. We looked at the 4 municipal properties I mentioned before at the last meeting. I can give you a quick rundown of those again if you'd like. And then also looked at Kenny's property, so five projects in total. Some promising aspects to many of the properties, although I would say it's unlikely that we'll find a project for everyone. Due to, sometimes size constraints, potentially even the current management of the property. But nevertheless, we'll come out of this in probably, I think it's going to be 4 or 5 weeks from now. Watershed Consulting will have the completed extremely preliminary designs for each of the 5 sites. And so I'll have a little bit more to talk about at that time. And basically what that would look like is a very first look at potential best management practices that could be implemented on the properties to achieve a phosphorus reduction. And they would present ideas for each of those sites, provide a rough estimate of the phosphorus reduction potential, and then a really, really rough estimate of the design and implementation costs. So once we get that information, I'll be excited to bring that back to you to get your feedback on that. And at that point, we'll have a chance to really dive in a little bit deeper on the various sites and, get some feedback from you and make some decisions about whether we want to move forward with any of the projects, assuming that at least one of them pans out to be cost efficient. Any questions from folks?
Brian, I have one. Just can you give a sense of the range of what these projects would look like? Like, what's the maximum amount that would be done in any given site?
Well, it could range from constructing flood benches to help the river access some floodplain. It could involve potentially a little bit of land reshaping, but if we're starting to talk about moving lots of sediment, the cost efficiency of the project goes down in a hurry. So not talking about parcel scale soil extraction to create a floodplain. It's more like putting in projects that would help the river access floodplain that already exists. But due to the fact that the banks are scoured in some places, it makes it less likely that the river can actually access that floodplain. So things like that. I don't think we'll be looking at any buffer plantings. I might be wrong, but I don't think that's a path that we're gonna follow here. But that is I suppose that's maybe a possibility on the lower fairgrounds parcel.
Thanks.
Yep.
Hey, Brian, good to see you. Thanks for the update and for moving this forward. Just wondering, this is getting ahead of the game a little bit, but what the landscape looks like these days for funding for implementation of projects, just given what's going on at the federal level. Is there funding still around for moving the kinds of things forward that you were just describing as being in the range of possibilities?
Yep, I can drive my dump truck full of money right to town and we can get this baby done. It's all state money.
It is.
So yes, it's 100% state funded. So there is no concern from that perspective. So, sometimes that makes me the most popular guy in the room. I can't figure out why though. Yeah, so coming out of this, as I mentioned, it would be a very preliminary design idea for each of the sites. If we choose to move forward with any of those, we would then submit a request for funding for the design work, and then follow that with a request for funding for implementation. But the idea, and we're a little bit behind schedule, I'm not gonna lie, but the idea is that we would, if we find any projects that look good, we would be able to complete the design through the winter. Basically, we get the consultants back out to do any additional survey work they need to do. And then at that point, it doesn't matter if it snows or, whatever, they can do their design work. And then we can line up the implementation funding in the winter as well. So projects could start, as soon as it thaws in the spring. And that would be the schedule that I would hope that we could all, come to consensus around pursuing. I'm not concerned about the money disappearing, but, if the projects are ripe, let's do them.
It was helpful to have Ira and Kenny and I there because we could all talk about, we talked about the plans for Farley, for instance. So, the engineers are aware of the plans there and the invasive species work we've been doing at the Austin parcel. And Kenny talked about her property, but it's a nice stretch of river. When Kenny's property is across from Farley's and kind of south of Flatbread, from there all the way down to the town properties near town. So substantial stretch.
Brian, did you give the planning commission a list of those sites?
I did, yeah. I can share them again though, if you want, Bob. I can just send it to you directly.
That'd be great. Yes, please. Are you going to prioritize these? In other words, one, most important, 2, 3, 4?
Not in that sense. So really this funding is all based on, as I think I mentioned before, it's all about phosphorus reduction. I get about $1 million per year from the state to achieve a 70 kilogram phosphorus reduction. So I can spend about $15,000 per kilogram of phosphorus reduced. So if one of these projects comes up as being really cost efficient, we'll do one of them. If all 5 of the sites we can find cost efficient projects, we can do all 5 of them. That's really, what it comes down to. We have a decent amount of funding at this point. We have, we've implemented projects throughout the Winooski River Basin, but the project pipeline has been a little bit thin. And so in my organization, we're really just reaching out to towns and trying to identify projects and moving them forward. So in Berlin, we're working with their road department to take a look at some culverts higher up in the town. we're doing something similar with the town of Cabot, you know, so we're just working with different towns to try to essentially drum up business for this until our NGO partners kind of make the pivot to this program, which is still kind of new. And at that point, I would expect the funding requests to get a bit more competitive.
There are questions for Brian? So Brian, toward the end of the summer, we kind of expect to hear back from you?
Yeah, I would say beginning-ish of August. I'll be gone just at the first part of August, so probably won't be until the second week of August that I'll reach back out with this, Kurt.
Okay, just let us know when you're ready.
Yeah, and I did have one question though, since I'm here, and I think maybe it got answered as part of the last conversation, but are there plans to log in Scrag again? And if so, what's the time frame for that?
There's no active plan for near-term harvesting currently.
So that's at least 3 years, Chris, or?
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I'm asking all these leading questions is that another project type just opened up under this funding that I have, and it's to look at old logging roads and skid trails. And so it's possible there could be some money to do some work in town forests as well. Unfortunately, and it's really frustrating, but unfortunately, we can't use that money to do water quality work on hiking trails. Don't ask me why, because I don't have an answer. Yeah, I feel your pain, Chris. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Again, I'm not here to tell you.
Well, we're gonna decommission.
Can we designate them non-hiking trails?
Yeah.
I think we can just call them all logging trails and then we'll be all
Die
fine.
down, you know.
Wait till somebody tells us that it's not.
I mean, one of our hiking trails is a logging trail.
and
Yeah, they
it's-
specifically address that. They specifically address that, but I do still think there may be opportunity. In any case, I spend a lot of my own free time out in Scrag, and I'll probably poke around. And if I think something looks good, Chris, I might pester you to come out and take a look at it with me if you're interested.
Sure.
Wonderful.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Well, Brian, thanks for looking out for us.
You bet. You bet. Yeah. Well, keep up all the good work. And I've been telling other folks about the goats, you know, talking about the site work and a lot of how the funding for the Clean Water Service Provider program, it doesn't allow for herbicide use for management, but I have been, talking about the goats a little bit in meetings and have confirmed that it is an allowable expense. So if we do find good projects in town, then it is possible that we would be able to fund some of that goat work. I'm not necessarily talking about getting a herd and keeping them out there all summer, but at least making a contribution towards some of that. They specify that it has to be manually controlled. And I said, do goats count? And then people laughed and I said, no, I'm actually serious. Do goats count? People said, well, that sounds manual to me. So there we go.
Not chemical, not mechanical.
Of the two options, it's more towards mechanical.
Yeah.
I like what you're thinking.
Thanks, Brian.
All right. Well, thanks, folks.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Take care.
Brian.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's good having him live in Waitsfield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we should plan on that for our August meeting.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mention a flood bench to help direct the channel. Floodplain, what does a flood bench look like?
Good question. Hey, Brian, come
I'm
back.
pretty sure it's just you step the bank back from a vertical wall, you cut steps. And so that it slows, it doesn't, as it starts to, instead of staying channelized until it reaches the top of it, you just basically, instead of sloping it too, you cut it into benches.
There's actually on the northern part of the Farley property, there is kind of a bench there. And the engineer was saying, okay, this could be, this is already you know, taking some flood water, and it has already this year.
But
Yeah,
what,
the bank is really steep up till then, and then there's just, it lowers the bed and then it's back up again.
what do they call dead trees that fall in the river? Are those benches too?
So they direct the water.
I mean, they can act like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway.
That's if you're paddling or not.
Call it-
You don't like.
I'm sure they call that-
Stay as far away from them as possible.
Pretty sure they call that fish habitat, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Ecological
Well, sometimes they do put logs
Oh, yeah.
in a certain fashion,
Right,
just to
right.
slow
right,
the water down.
Yeah.
The fish like it better.
right.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, well, we're on to item 6, Woo Fairgrounds Management Plan Development and some stewardship topics.
Great.
Chris?
So Gail and I have been working on the first item mostly. And what I have to report is I have 2 folks that are interested in taking on certainly about hearing about more about what we need for the update of the plan. They're both folks that came recommended by the VLT. One is Drew Pollock Bruce from CRO Planning and Design. They're natural resources consultants. They do a fair amount of recreation. I think they're based in Williston. He seemed quite interested. All this stuff's in their wheelhouse. And just kind of waiting to hear from us what we actually need. I had a good conversation with Michael Snyder, who surprisingly is interested in doing this work. Can't get much closer to the person that did our last plan. He's married to her. So getting the data would be easier, I would think. So they're both interested. The one thing I would say, comparing the 2, is with CRO Planning Design, they do have GIS license, they have GIS technicians, they have in-house folks that can deal with all the data layers. Michael Snyder needs to hire that work done. He hasn't invested in the software. He doesn't feel like he's going to, but he's acting in natural resource consulting. So this is the kind of stuff he's happy to do, likes to do, would love to hear more about it. I don't have a good handle on what kind of a cost we would be up against here. I do want to kind of go back and understand what our cost was last time when Kristen did the work. Do you recall? I believe it came in under our procurement threshold.
Yeah.
I think it did, but I need to.
Yeah. So there's a few holes here, I think, before we can. Well, we need to figure out our next steps. One is, for me, one question is, do we have access to all the digital files that were produced for the 2014 plan? I am not somebody that's been into the old website or the new website or the wherever things are stored to understand, do we have everything? Right, so that to me is step 1, because we want to give that everything to the consultant. And then we want to give the everything that we just had done for the fairgrounds parcel, which we have, to the consultant. Right, and then have them do the compilation of what's necessary. So we need that understanding of what digital files are available from the 2014 planning effort. To me, that's a big step. And then 2 is we need to understand with fairgrounds, and Gail, jump in if you have anything you want to interject. With fairgrounds, I feel like we don't yet know what the extent is of what the select board would like us to manage versus what they would like us to leave to them. Right, where's the line in the sand? And maybe there isn't one. Maybe they're going to tell us, put the field in to the management plan and we'll take it back out if we feel okay. We don't know yet. So we need to have that conversation. Right. And sort of get our directive from the select board.
Didn't that subject surface?
There were some discussions a while ago about that, and it was, I think in general, Conservation Commission, take everything except the pasture.
The upper one.
Yeah, right, the upper pasture. And my understanding is that hasn't been any further discussion at the select board level about the potential uses of that part of the property, in any detail at all, so.
Brian?
I would assume that the select board would probably advise us, or they reconfirm that kind of initial discussion, but it'd be worth going back and.
Yeah, I mean, why I think it needs clarity is one, what is the pasture? Because currently the pasture includes the brook. Right. Which it shouldn't, right? So where's the line in the sand?
Top of slope is what I would advocate for.
Yes.
So Brian, I spoke with Brian mid-May because I was trying to get some grant money for fencing for Hadley to keep the cattle off the upper pasture. I mean, on the pasture and out of the brook. And he said he was going to, he hadn't yet talked to the select board, but I think that they will be getting, there are several reasons to clarify that point. So hopefully that happens soon.
Okay. And then.
Well, Chris, I could follow up with the select board on that.
Okay.
Your work on that question.
Okay. Great. And then the other thought I had was, I'm trying to understand whether we actually put a request for proposal out last time, or did we just hire Kristen because she was under our procurement amount? If we have an RFP from that effort, it would be nice to model it. If that, conversely, if we have a current town level RFP for projects that are under the below de minimis for the procurement standards, then it would be good to use that as a platform. If that's what we think we need to do.
I don't think we did an RFP last time.
I don't remember doing it either. I think we hired Kristen.
Just did it. Yeah.
Right.
But we also got proposals. Was it for Woo or for Scrag? It's been long enough that I need to dust it off of my memory banks, but we at least reached out to Robert Turner and others. And I'm trying to remember which town forest it was for and what our process was.
Yep.
So
So I'm glad you're here to help you stimulate.
Well,
remember,
it's not crystal
Yeah,
clear.
who's got the best memory here? That's the best.
It's definitely not me.
But I probably have it in my files.
Okay.
Somewhere in my paper files.
So if we can kind of dial that in over the next month and then have a better, stronger discussion next month's meeting about let's lay out these next steps. Both of these folks they're busy, but they're not, they'll entertain us whenever we bring a request.
I know the town is, recently they've kind of like a certain boilerplate that they.
I just went through some revisions to the RFP template I used in 2023 for phase one, and York provided some comment and requested some additions. So I don't think it was reviewed by the attorney, but I'll give you that. And it's way more detailed and concise than some of the historic RFPs I got.
Well, there's still certain
projects.
that's all boilerplate, but this probably should be in them.
So how I've described the scope verbally is that we have 120 plus or minus acre property that we have a management plan for, that was created by Kristen Sharpless in 2014 in concert with the town. that we now have an addition to that same property right next door to it. We have all the same studies that were done for 2014 for the new property, plus some work with trails. And that we want to synthesize this into one overarching plan for the whole property based on what we and goals and management goals that we determined previously, which we're going to want to revisit. And then the one public session like we normally would do, kind of following the same pattern. Public inputs period and draft plan and bring it to the town. So that's the short version, obviously, but to give that level of scope, each of these folks were completely content with where that's headed and tuned up for the challenge. So I thought that was good. I feel like it's probably our procurement number is like 5,000. Is that right? Is that where we have to go to a competitive bid after 5,000?
So I thought that might have been adjusted recently, but I'm not sure if
Whatever
I've got
it's 10
that
or
straight.
something.
I think
No,
it
Bob?
might have been.
I'll find
Right,
out.
so-
I'll find out.
yeah,
I'll find out.
I have a,
5.
I have a whole copy of the procurement of the purchase. What's it called? Policy.
Procurement policy.
Yeah, procurement policy on my email. I can just email it.
Okay.
To whoever wants it, but it's quite lengthy and spells everything out.
Okay.
It's not 5 minutes worth of reading. It's longer.
That was changed fairly recently too, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I can do that.
So
So
that's,
you'll send that around, Leo.
Yep.
Okay, great.
I believe we have all of our studies in place, right? We got everything we need.
Yeah, I think so, right, Gail?
You do.
Yeah. So I will try to make some effort to determine what we've got for the old stuff. I'm gonna make the foray into whatever the town's database is that where these things might live. And if that's what I understood was there's an old website server that might have some data. And then there's the new one, which has
There's always
the
a
new
file
data.
cabinet and a scanner too.
Yeah, if we have that all, but what I'm
I
talking
think I've got a
about
list
is,
at home and from going through that file cabinet a few years ago. I don't recall that the 2014 plan was in there, but
right, but the more important part, we've got paper copies of the plan. We have that. The more important part is the data layers that were provided and utilized for that plan. We would want them again.
Right.
And really, if we have them, then we don't have to bother Kristen to see if she can dig them out of our archive and pull them out and give them to us again.
put them in Mike's back pocket on his way out the door.
Right, I mean, there's a potential that we can gain some efficiency there, but I don't want to have to bug that person. I would like to see if we've got stuff in person.
So my guess is, I haven't been on the newer town website anytime recently, but last that I was months and months ago, there wasn't much there, if anything. So like, to the extent that we have anything, it would be on the old server, if that like Ghost is still accessible, which I hope it is, because there's an awful lot of stuff on there, not just about ledges that's on there that we need to move over.
Yeah.
I don't know if the GIS data was part of what was on there, but like if we have it, that's probably where it would be. I mean, Mark Haberly would be the other person to ask, actually.
Yep.
Because he might still know where some of that is, as our GIS guy for a while. Yeah, and then probably nothing that you're not already thinking, but just to say it. So, some of we have the underlying plans from Audubon and the Forest Stewardship Plan and the Natural Communities Inventory from Brett from back then as well. And if we don't have the data layers from those, we could probably get them at least from those, from Brett and Steve. Steve Huckabee.
Yep.
So at least that part of things.
Yep.
Should be. Not straightforward.
Right.
That's why we had Brett Engstrom did an ecological assessment of the Fairgrounds property, and county forest did the forest and management recommendation. Steve Hagendoo, did a bird habitat study. And Nate Binhammer from VLT mapped all the existing trails, both, and just had some suggestions on possible connections to bring the two together. So that's kind of what we've done so far.
That's been our standard approach. First time around with Woo, first time around with Scrag. Now extending it to the fairgrounds.
And is that 2014, you're updating it because it has to go every 10 years? Is that?
Nope,
What-
we're updating it because it's a really solid jumping off point for the neighboring property next door. Right, so we've already got this. And we've been through the whole public planning process for that. Now we've got this next to it. So we're kind of treating it as if it were any particular. I mean, for me, stepping back, if this was a private holding, this is what you would do. You would add these acres on here and you develop a management plan and you would update the existing plan. So barring other suggestions, that's where we're headed.
Well, and it may end up being, it may be semantics, but it could be an amendment to the existing plan. Or something, which is what we did for Scrag with the gateway parcel. So it's, but the point is the same. We've got a really solid existing plan. We want to build on that rather than like invent things and recreate it.
Right, but at the same time, we do owe it to ourselves and to the public to read through the old plan and see if there's anything lingering that doesn't make sense or things that we haven't ever thought of that we should incorporate now. And just basically update and amend type of thing. So,
I'll say what I said before. If we're gonna hire a planner, we need to have some idea ourselves what we want to have happen
yes,
on the property.
yes.
Do we want to manage it passively, actively, some of it, all of it? There's a number of options here. If I had the task of drafting a plan, I would want to know what the landowner had in mind to do. If it was on track, good, draw the plan. If it's off track, well, okay, you talk with the owner about what their objectives are. And we're gonna have to, I think, in fairness to a consultant, decide on our objective. Otherwise, the consultant is not going to know what to address and how. If we're just looking for another string of management options, then that's what we should say we're looking for. Management options, and we end up picking some. But if you want a plan that you're gonna live by for the next 10, 15 years, you need to know something about landowner objectives. And that's the capacity of that land to do what the landowner wants against the reality of what the landowner wants. So we can't just say to Kristen or anybody, go out there and do a plan. In fairness to them, they need to know landowner objective.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that, Leo, but I think we've defined them quite thoroughly in the 2014 plan. And I'll be interested to hear if you believe that there's any drastic difference in how we would define our goals and objectives for the update from where it was in 2014, because that's what my impression is. We've done that for half of, or more than half of what this, what the next plan will cover.
Yeah.
More than half of the acres. Right? But there will certainly be some modernization.
Yeah.
I think sorry, Leo.
No, anything, or when you redraft plans, start all over again every time. If you can capitalize on some things that are already in place, great.
Yeah.
If you have to start over, fine.
Well, there'd be maybe some things that are unique to the fairgrounds property that, you know, are not anticipated, like in the WU objectives. It also occurs to me, I agree with you, Leo, but I also think a good consultant can help in that thinking process and say, have you thought about this? You know, so together, you know, we kind of arrive at a place that we feel good about the property.
Yeah, that was gonna make that same point. And I think the third stream of potential stream of input into the goals and objectives is the public, is the community.
Mhm.
What does the community want us to do?
Right.
And I think we can jumpstart that by sharing what we think makes sense and then getting feedback. So we're not presenting them with a blank piece of paper, you know, for sure. But I think, you know, it'll be important for us to build in that, and that, you know, so sounds like that's been part of your conversation with both Michael and Drew. And I guess I'd just say that, like, reflecting back on the processes that we had for WU and for Scrag with Kristen, that I think the public involvement process was really good in those, and that she played a really important role in that, in helping to prepare materials and slides and helping to, you know, facilitate some of the public dialogue alongside us. So it wasn't like she's doing it for us, but it was very much of a collaboration, I think. So I would hope that we would end up with something similar with whoever we work with on this one.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Can I ask Leo what, just for clarification? So in the old plan, there was a segment with visions and goals, and then it went into the, you know, the actual study. So are you saying for that part that there should be something different in that? Or are you saying that the last management plan didn't address those visions and goals? Or I just want clarity in how you.
We did what the plan called for up till now, or the immediate future. If we want to do the same thing and add to it, fine. If we want to do something different, fine. If there are values stated in the old plans, we call it that are still valid today, which we believe are appropriate for public land, then we say it. But the point is, with old plans, you can start over, or you can take all or some, or anything, do anything you want, because you're starting over again. You may elect to buy the same car, same color, drive it down the same road, or you may instead buy a drag racer or something, or an antique car, which is what I've done. But anyway.
I think of it a little bit differently. I think of it like we own a house and we maintain the house. We do it to a certain standard, and we just built an addition.
Exactly.
And what are we doing with that?
That's fine.
And not scrapping the initial building and completion, is not gonna.
Yeah, I've seen some additions that didn't look too good. Yeah,
Let's not.
but I mean, you know, it's a little bit of a different piece, so. I think it's.
We have the addition, it's how do we maintain it?
Right.
Yeah,
What are we gonna do?
Right.
So early on, when this concept was being incubated, wasn't there a feeling that the new land was unique? Had some unique features to it, not only in terms of it's not flat, it's rugged terrain.
Right.
And that, and I'm getting out of my league here a little bit, but the idea of what was being termed an old forest was something that might be worth looking at from a legacy point of view.
Sure. And there's some of that on the original parcel as well. So, I mean, it's a matter of how we want to deal with that. You know, it's not to oversimplify from a forester standpoint, but these are forest stands, right? These are how that gets handled from a forest management standpoint for long-term forestry planning, silviculture and that type of thing. That's one part of this, right? And then there's all the other studies and features and things that we know about and we want to be able to comment about and decide how we want to treat and dovetail everything together into one overarching plan, right? Where some places are going to be treated, well, everything will be treated differently from each other, obviously. But some places will have more intensive uses and some will have less. Whether we're deciding as a group here to promote a recreation only area versus anything that has active forest management. We're the people that get to decide how we want to portray that to the public and decide and let them decide if that was what they'd like. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think another really important part of the context for the addition is that we have management guidance in the form of the donor's intent that was expressed to us. That's not, legally binding, but that, at least I don't know what it is, but that steers some things in certain directions. So I think we need to honor that as we go forward with the
So in
process.
drawing the line that we're looking for between select board responsibility for the fairgrounds and what we're looking at, I mean, is that a line or does the fairgrounds need its management plan?
The fairgrounds, meaning that upper pasture,
Yes.
need to look back at the guidance on, the donor intent, but I think it's kind of all along, there's been this recognition that that part of the overall property is different than the rest of it. And so whether that means extracting it from the management planning process that we're embarking on and having it be its own thing that the select board figures out, or if they say, well, actually keep it in for now and we'll figure it out later, I think we're still going to probably treat that
would be
that part differently, because
my direct approach on it is let's consider it part of the parcel. I mean, the conservation goals are the same, whether it's going to be used for, some septic leach field or not. We're going to address invasives. It's just like Chris was saying, it's a forest thing. You got to take your eyes off the property line, take your eye off the circle around the fairgrounds and just look at it as an entire unit and determine what are the best uses and what we need to do in terms of, combating invasives and protecting sustainability and long-term longevity of the forest out there. So I would vote strongly that we include any type of conservation concerns in our plan for the fairgrounds component. And like you said, Phil, if they decide they want to use it and put condos up there, then it's going to get separated out. And
yeah, but I think at the basis I'm with you, but I could see an inflection point in which the public has invested in helping to guide our overall management plan. And if we are including the fairgrounds, we would want to be absolutely certain that we're explaining that at any given time that the select board may decide this is out. Now, honestly, that's true for the whole property.
exactly. I know anything we plan is.
But we know that there are some other things that are being thought of for the fairgrounds portion that are not pertinent necessarily to the overall conservation of everything, the other 200 acres of the property, right? So we don't want to get people's expectations up that we don't want to deflate, and this is the inflection point, is we don't want people to invest their time and effort in comments and then have it, 3 years later be pulled out from under them. And that's the way it would feel, I think, to some folks that think that they're really having some impact that suddenly,
Well,
now we're gonna do something different.
Maybe we shouldn't focus specifically on a lot of prescriptions for that area, but just.
Yeah, well, I think we could mention that.
Part of there's a lot of invasives around there, and that's something I think we can do, that everybody would be happy with. It's not like somebody's gonna be upset that we're getting rid of the barberry, because, who cares? Ultimately, it might be a paved road right where we just remove that barberry if the town decides they want to go that route. But in the short term, let's take what we think we can manage up there and go for broke.
Ideally, we'll have guidance from the select board before we go to the public. So it seems
Clear at
that's,
this point.
Yeah.
You know,
I think we need that guidance pretty early on.
I don't know if we're gonna get it early on though. I mean, I don't think they're even thinking about that property, maybe outside of the septic capacity standpoint, very intently at the moment.
I think
Bob,
that's
what are your
probably,
inside thoughts on this?
The select board is about to look at a new work plan. You connected this at all? Well, the one that they tried to come up with 3 years ago that was lost, I mean, they haven't followed it. So they are retooling it. And this topic probably ought to be
Okay. Mhm.
added to the double star list of.
Topics.
right, but it's possible that they could say that they want to retain short-term as well as long-term lead on that portion of the property. And that in the short term, they're just gonna establish a formal lease with Hadley to continue to graze, for instance, and with, you know, us all working collaboratively to put up some fencing to keep the cows out of the riparian zone. Or I don't know if that's what they would do, but they could do that. And then that would, so they wouldn't have to do a lot, like a deep dive into what's going to happen with that parcel for the long term now. They could just, you know, kind of carry things forward for some increment of time. And that would take it off of our plate. Which, you know, I think I would envision whenever the time comes and whoever's in the lead for it, there will be a very robust public discussion about what ought to happen with that part of the property. And that it might behoove us to not get bogged down in that as part of our management planning if we're focused more on the forested lands, the riparian lands, you know, the uplands riparian zones, that kind of thing.
I get that. I don't think we should exclude it though, because like I was saying, it's got a lot of invasive species and that's something that's one of our priorities to address out there.
Right,
And
sure.
I mean, if we want to say anything inside the pasture fence, fine, and that's easy to write into the plan, but I mean, we're not gonna pick dandelion weeds out of the field. But
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And if the select board said, we'll take the lead on that part of the property, they could still ask us to manage the invasives on it on their behalf as part of our broader efforts on invasives all over town.
I just don't think we're gonna get a lot of direction at this moment, so we should just proceed like we would like to do with it, I think. And just, I mean, we're not, like I said, there's not gonna be a lot of recommendations for the actual field coming from us. At least not that I'm thinking of off the top.
I think if we had some clarity that in the near term, call it 5 years plus, their intention is to use it for pasture and keep animals out of the stream. We mentioned that, we note it and move along. Right,
That's the most
or we say,
set of circumstances too.
right, but we need to draw a line with the public and say, you know, we either are or are not taking some responsibility for the management of that portion.
Right.
And if we are, then we can set some parameters on what that is, because.
But that's why we gotta ask the select board to make
Do they
some
want us to or
decision.
not?
Right,
Okay.
so that's the basic thing there. So we got some
Well,
to-dos here on this. And then the one last thing is, would we like to have a 15 to 30 minute session with these two people separately at one of our meetings and have a discussion about scope and their style and, you know, let them sort of give us their proposal of how they do this work? Or are there other avenues that we would like to look at to try to understand these folks better and help us make a choice? Or is that if anyone has someone else that they'd like to promote, feel free.
Not to me. I mean, I'd look at it like a job interview, you know, get the resume in, i.e. proposal, and then determine if there's if there's no clear choice, then maybe we do bring them in and have individuals sort of.
And maybe, Chris, you and Gail could, you know, screen the initial, if, assuming we get two proposals, and if one of them is clearly the winner, just make that recommendation. But if you felt some additional input would be helpful in making the decision.
Well, I mean, it's
Whatever,
Sounds
that'd be an option.
yeah, that sounds fine. Yeah. A few of us know Michael Snyder.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think any of us know. Do you know?
I've been in a public meeting with him. I don't know him well, but I know of his work, although I haven't heard of him doing something like this before.
So out of respect for the folks at the table here, to me, it's important to put a face to the name and get a chance to throw some questions at some.
He was my TA. I'm confident in Michael's, at least from a forestry standpoint.
I think that would be good practice, but.
How about we draw some, a vision? Similar to what shows up in the, management plans for both Scranton and New Ledges. And we give that to the potential consultants. Almost surely they will have different capacities to bring to those goals and objectives. And in fairness to them, I think it's appropriate to do that. Who is best suited to do the kinds of things we're thinking about? And let's not be afraid to venture out into this thing, guys. Let's decide something. I've been pushing on this. We're talking around it all the
We're not
time.
talking around it.
But we need to get some idea of what we want to happen.
We have it. We have a 2014 management. Still valid today.
And we've
For
got,
half of it, more than half of it.
and we've got the donor's intent for guidance.
So why is this not a good jumping off place for?
We're gonna be looking up,
The
we
next
need
one.
all this new data compiled and digested, and that's where you start to get vision and scope from.
We don't have anything for the fairgrounds.
You get right, but we got
We got zero.
Sure, we have the
way
donor's
with
intent.
zero.
So Leo, is the vision and intent for the overall, the current Wool Ledges, is that not sufficient in your mind? Do we need something separate for this particular parcel?
I don't see why we need to. We can have two different visions, one for each of the two, or we can put them together.
Why would we want two different visions for two parcels that are sitting next to each other that are forested?
So Casey, here you've started down the road. Now we're beginning to talk about what we don't want. That's the start. Why would we want to? Well, we don't want to. We
You
want-
should run this then. That's where you're at, because I've talked about this quite a bit.
Well, if you know, if you want to have the two people come in and you could give each party ahead of time what our visions were and have them come in here and talk to us, and then we'll make a decision.
Ted, what I want to avoid is not hearing all of what Leo is promoting here with this, because what I've said is, and I thought we all agreed to, is that we have a set of visions and goals for the Blue Ledges Town Forest. We just added acreage to it, which is clearly different, but is clearly attached to it. And we've just added. So now we're gonna take the plan, we adjust whatever needs to be adjusted and incorporate the rest of the property so that we do not have two management plans for lands that are sitting next to each other. That's kind of where I'm at here. I mean, at the basis. We've got all the studies, we've got all the background stuff, we've got all the public input for the first 125 acres.
Yeah, but the characteristics of the two properties, there are some differing characteristics of the two properties. To me, if you wanted to have an example of an old growth forest, you'd simply take the fairgrounds piece and start an old growth forest management thinking around that. You wouldn't do it for the Blue Ledges for lack of a better name, piece, because it's already been logged once in the last 20 years. It was last harvested in 1999. So that has had machinery and chainsaws and a forester in there doing something. Fairgrounds has been left alone. Left alone. I've been here in the valley since 1969, and there's never been a logging operation on that property. Now that's almighty hard to find in this valley. A sizable, readily accessible piece that has not been logged for probably close to a lifetime. Now, to me, that's a characteristic that's worth thinking about separately for the time being. And it wouldn't bother me to have two different management plans. You can have the same philosophy, same phrases and words would apply, but it comes in terms of action. Actions taking place, actions planned, they would be different.
Right, but that's forest areas within the overall property.
Right, you could
Those
just
are
treat it like a
areas of-
stand prescription.
Forest areas or forest stands that you're gonna treat differently from the rest of the property, is what
And they're
you
not
just
governed
described.
by the property line.
Well,
You read management plans for forest for
yeah,
decades.
the advantage of fairgrounds is that it's an entity with recoverable property lines. So,
Well, if you have some visions on the existing plan, but there are a few others that we think are a little different or should be pointed out. Maybe, okay, you got an old forest or you've got, scraggy stuff you want to take care of. We can just point those things out.
Well,
That's all you have to be done to show that there are a few things different for that particular piece of property.
for instance, if somebody told me, I want you to go out and find 5 huge ash trees and treat them the way Caitlin described to us, where would you go?
First place I'd go is in my backyard.
Yeah, no. One of the 3 big wolf trees on my stone wall line, I'm happy to
They
get.
keep getting bigger.
Leo, would it be, how about if I send out what was from the 2014 plan? And people can comment on that and see if they want to change that. And then we'll move from there. Does that make sense? As far as our kind of goals and goals for the management plan? If
So that's one part, but I think we really need to keep our eyes on the donor's statement of intent, which is part of the deed. So it's attached to the deed. It's not, sorry, it's not part of the deed, but it's recorded with the deed. And it lays out a lot of what the donor hoped would happen on this property. And I think that we should try to honor that to the greatest extent that we can. I think it aligns pretty closely with a lot of what you're describing, Leo.
Yeah.
so how about if I send?
There are other aspects of it in there that tie into it.
How about
Yeah, I think we need to send
those and in an email to everyone, and then we can kind of come to terms with that before we actually meet with the consultants. And then we'll have some jumping off point. We'll have consensus in this group, and we can move forward with what we're asking them to do. Does that?
It's a select board.
Yeah.
Like the select board.
I think that sounds good, but I do agree with what Kurt said a little bit ago of where ideally we would get the benefit of the consultant's thoughts to help inform us craft a vision that integrates the guidance, the vision and goals and whatnot from the existing plan with the guidance that's in the donor's statement of intent and other things that we might want to factor.
I'm not saying for the final project. I'm saying just before we get the consultants, it sounds like Leo's hoping to get consensus with what we're asking for. And so we could perhaps do that with this group just online. We don't have to, by email, we don't have to necessarily, because we're going to be waiting for the select board information. We can just kind of put our thoughts down together so that we have a sense of what, between the donors' intent and the former or the existing management plan, the goals of those? Does that seem like an unnecessary exercise, or Phil, you look skeptical?
No, I think we absolutely should have those two things in front of us. I just don't, I think we shouldn't try to get to a crystallized vision of exactly where we're going before we engage with the consultants, because we want to have dialogue with the consultant or consultants to help inform what our ultimate vision and direction is, as well as then the more specifics about like, should we consider treating ash trees on any of these lands in whatever sort of way, or as an example. So it's like big vision down to more granular stuff.
I think maybe another set of input is, we've talked about this, the fairground, the new property on a number of occasions, at our meetings, and some of the ideas about the old growth has come up, and special ecological areas we talked about with Brett. So I think if we call through our minutes, there are some discussions there that we've had that would be useful to inform or share with the consultant too.
Yep. One of the first places I'd go is to Brett Angstrom and ask him, is there anything here that we should stay away from?
We've done that. We did that, Leo. We did that, and it's in the minutes. Some that's why I was referencing some of the minutes, because we asked them that at the meeting.
And his report does a nice job of calling out some sensitive areas, not every single, rare species that's out there, but that's why I'm saying I'd love to see all this information we just got compiled before I really can start to even think about management strategies, really. I mean, yeah, I've walked the parcel a little bit, and I've got some general big ideas, but there's a lot out there to digest. And I mean, I couldn't sit down tomorrow and write a vision statement for us to give this to consultants. I'd want to have a lot of preliminary work put together, and then you craft that final vision once you've gotten to that, initial design, or, just everything's in front of you, and you can look at some maps and you can decide where we don't want people, where we might be good places to have people, those kinds of things. I don't have that in my head. I need some help.
It's going to take time.
Gail's going to send out the Rule Ledgers plan.
I'll send out the Wool Ledges plan and the donor's intent from the deed, and then we'll have both of those to have a more full discussion.
We should look back at the minutes.
Right. Maybe go back through the minutes and.
Yep, I'll do that also.
So what's the legal standing of those owners' comments?
They're intense. They're not legally binding. They're not legally binding. But I think we should make a very good faith effort to honor them wherever possible. I think in the spirit, yes, yeah, for the spirit of the donation, and I think many of them are incredibly sensitive to and proper.
Yeah. I need to scoot in a minute because I've got another meeting coming up at 8:30, but I need to get home for just one other thought, just process wise. Chris, I really appreciate the work that you and Gail have done in moving this forward and reaching out to the consultants and all of that and sharing the sort of direction that we want to go in. I guess I'm wondering if we need to, and I don't want to bog down the process, so that's not, I'm trying to avoid that, but if it would behoove us to, even if we don't need to do an RFP, which I hope we don't have to go through that formal step, but we'll find out what the threshold is, of whether it would behoove us to try to just write down a scope so that both consultants have the same thing, that we have a shared understanding, and then the two consultants or any others that we put it out to have something in writing that they can be responding to that supplements what you've already shared with them. And I realize like that maybe it's easier said than done. It also, if we did an RFP before, if we could draw off of that, that would help to jumpstart things. And I'll try to see if I can find anything in my files that can help to inform that. Anyway,
that would be great. Thanks. Yeah, I agree. That's kind of what I was hoping to get to today,
Okay.
but, we aren't gonna get there today, so that's.
Well, you've already said, I think, what you thought for a scope. Yeah, you've explained what you were looking for, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but what I'm hearing is, internal motivation to either add to or take away some of our previous goals for the property. And that's fine, but we just need to do that in a process that makes sense, that honors the process. And not just decide that that's what we think it's gonna be. We are employed by the town here, by the public, we represent the public.
Yeah. Agreed, and I think it's an open question on whether we'll want to add to or
Right.
to try
I agree.
subtract from or just leave them alone.
Yeah, right.
For certainly for the pre-existing portion, and then whether that spills over to the new portion or not is really what we need to think. I think like what we've had has been great for
It's
the
been,
lands that we've owned.
we've generally had good guidance on what to do with, from a stewardship standpoint, with these properties. And follow it as diligently as we can.
Just
Great.
Right. Thanks, Chris.
Part two.
Thanks, yeah. Part two.
So part two on Woo is trail stewardship duties. That the last iteration was James and me and Peter, PJ. And our last foray into that was, a pretty good look at the trails that are mapped and on the kiosks, and some trail signage to help people stay on track, if you will. On those trail corridors, which are both on lands owned by the town and easement on lands of Hastings Meadow, those within those corridors, there is, as a result of the rain in May, there's some erosion problems that we need to deal with. Right. There's also been some signs that went missing on us. And I think we need to engage with Stewart MRV if that's who's dealing with the kiosks. Is that who's on the kiosks? Because we're missing poop bags and the containers for them and that type of stuff, and dog poop, that's what I'm talking about. So I guess we kind of need to understand that a little better. And then the Pine Hill Lane situation where we have people that are still driving up past the sign, even though the sign says there's no parking. So those few things, I guess what I'm asking is, can we, strictly from the trail stewardship standpoint, can we reform a subcommittee, which I would be willing to be on? I'll ask James if you would like to continue to be on it, and is there another third person that's willing to be part of that, to help kind of keep these little things moving forward and take care of some of the work on the ground?
Well, I got the history. Just from the get-go, in the first trailhead sign was ours. And so we were in a group of 13 or so parties, all of whom kind of went their, waffled around in their own way. But there was a theme of some sort of valley-wide format.
Right.
And so the trailhead signs are all the same structure and so on. The wording was more general to the valley than we perhaps had hoped for Scragg.
Yep.
And the whole subject of dogs and leashing and dog poop in bags and so on and so forth somehow or other we conscientiously kind of avoided being a Me Too operation there. Now, I mean, in fact, we did. And I do have a container for bags that I guess Eric Friedman was the one that chased me down and provided it to us. So I don't know where he fits in the context of the trail network and so on, but anyway, I don't know whether we've got a problem or not, but I just had a little bit of an edge of, Scragg is different. And doesn't want to be a cookie cutter of all the rest of the trails in the valley.
Are you talking about, when you said Scragg is different, do you mean Blue Ledges is different? That's what we're talking about.
Well, I understand that, but the two of them are management.
Right. Okay, so what I'm hearing is, we can't expect Stewart MRV to deal with the kiosks and the dog book bags or any of that. That's
It's not dog food bags.
That's not on their agenda.
I would at least ask before we assume that won't. And I think Eric, and also I think the Path Association, Misha, has kind of, my understanding is kind of taking the lead on the kiosks, that it's kind of been handed off from the planning district to the Path.
If that's the case, they're only doing the ones for the path, because all the ones on the path have dog poop bags, but none of the other ones do.
So maybe there's a conversation to be had there. It may not go anywhere. I don't.
No, I will. I'll ask Eric. It's no problem.
I would start there and then if he, see where he wants you.
Okay.
So
that's good. And then
I got to split. Sorry, folks.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay,
Take care.
see you, Bill.
Good to see you all.
Well,
Good conversation.
thanks for coming, Phil.
Yeah.
As far as what I've identified for locations that have some water quality problems, it's basically handwork. It's not anything significant. Plugged culverts that overwashed, that kind of thing, we can pretty much do them by hand. It just shouldn't get any worse without some sort of mitigation. And we may decide, hey, what we really need is a mini excavator in here to go fix some of these things, because we have logging roads that are being used for hiking and biking. There, people cow path down over the water bars. The thing, the piece of road that goes up behind Jameson's to the ledges is starting to show its age as far as having been properly put to bed with water bars and then recreated heavily. So we're due for something there. There was some issues that, I mean, those soils have taken a lot of rain over their lifetime since it was last logged in there in 1999. And they're relatively stable, but there's some places where they aren't. And there's a particularly bad spot on the short connector between the Blue Ledges town forest proper, the Waldron property, and the lot 13 property within the easement on Hastings Meadow that needs some serious work. It can be done by hand. It would be better to do it with machines. But I think given the circumstances with the underlying landowner, we should probably try to make an effort to find bodies to do it by hand. That's kind of what I'm thinking there.
Chris, I'd be happy with you, if you organize a work day, I'd be happy to pitch in, and
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if Bruno.
Right, and so thank you, and the question then is, how do we as a group feel about a road, a work day that includes public outside of the Conservation Commission?
Let me chime in here. There's so much to do with Scragg too. All what you just said is totally going on the Scragg Trail. We need public assistance.
That's good.
That's the bottom line.
That's fine, but I'm talking
In
about
support
talking
of,
about this right now, so let's see.
no, I'm saying for all of what we need to do, not just woo, but we need public assistance, because you and I and a couple occasional volunteer days is not gonna get it cut and done.
I think that this is something that we need to make as as we're making management plans and you know, providing these trails and these lands for the public use, there's a responsibility as well. And we can perhaps just change the mindset around that and say, you know, these are work days, kind of like what Kurt's done with the knotweed. We have, you know, a fair number of community volunteers that come in to do this. We should be doing that also for the trail maintenance, because people like to work, you know, outside and to get knowledge of how to maintain a trail or whatever. So if we have some good leaders and, you know, then we could perhaps even have people take on responsibility for it throughout the year, things like that. So I think that's a really good point, Chris, and a very important one.
Yep, we've been here though. I mean, I put together a spreadsheet a year ago and shared with everybody, like, here's our trail maintenance needs, and it never went anywhere. So here we are a year later, nothing's been done, and everything's gotten pounded on the last year with rains. So I'm happy to make it work, but let's do it.
Well, so what I'm hearing, James, is tell me if I'm right here. I think you are more invested in Scrag. You have done tremendous work getting that in place.
And Bob too.
Getting the new trails up, all that type of stuff. And so it's near and dear to your heart. And you should focus on that. I mean, we all should be thinking about it, but you can be the champion for Scrag and I will be the champion for Woo, and we can get things done that way, I think. So I'm not asking you to, you know, like, stop what you're doing at Scrag to help me.
No, I know, I was just echoing the concerns you have about Woo and just trying to elevate the discussion here, because we do have a lot of work to do. That's all I was trying to do. I'm not trying to divide and conquer as per se, but I do think we just need to solicit more community help.
Sure.
And
reach out to the different communities so the people who use Woo are different from, I mean, not totally, but there are different groups that use both areas. So maybe we can reach out to the, you know, bicycles for the Woo ledges, and the hikers or the snowshoers for Scrag. I mean, are there ways of kind of connecting to those different?
Yeah, well, there certainly is, and you know, you brought up the bike group, and that's partly my thinking, because that is, you know, we're not allowing bikes on Scrag.
Right,
and
right.
we're allowing them on ledges within reason.
Right.
The places that I'm saying need help on Woo are the places that we have mapped on the kiosks. Right, those are the trails that I'm most concerned with. Those locations are compromised right now. All the other stuff that's not on the map is generally on deer trails. It's not really going. Or old skid trails that are on Sandy Long's land. But those corridors, we need to make sure they're in better shape than they are. So to your point, I'm pretty confident I can talk to the Matter of Riders folks and say, hey, can we get 20 people for a trail day? And we'd have, right? Those are not the people that are, some of them might work on Scrag, but they're not motivated to do that for that sport, right? I'm not trying to, you know, capture all those people and all that effort specifically for what I want done. I'm just trying to say, this is an option for this portion of these trails. And we know that our group here is overwhelmed. There's not enough bodies or time here for us to do it ourselves. How much we open it up to the public becomes, you know, how much traction do you get? How many people will actually come? But then if you have too many, now you've got a problem too.
I know.
Right. So
yeah, I don't.
So how we
send
like a wide scale Valley Reporter style solicitation for this. I know that there's a couple of folks who have already expressed interest in helping out with Scrag. And I'm sure that we can find another group or several other individuals that come up. I mean, the biggest thing is getting out there and putting on paper what we need to do.
Right, yeah.
And knowing when, then coordinating when it can happen.
It sounds like you and Bob on Scrag sort of have a plan on what needs to be done.
Well, Bob,
And you, Chris, have sort of already stated before, you know, the idea of some of the things that need to be done. So I think that's great. If you can get the writers together on that end or somebody else at the other end, I would say wax up and go get them.
Sure.
Just another thought with that too is instead of having like just a whole bunch of people in one day and having it not being very easy to manage.
Yeah.
You could get groups together and then just, assign different tasks and just communicate. And one group will say, well, I can go out and spend 6 hours this day. And if you got a good list of the duties done, we can knock this, and this off. And then they can get back to the, you or James and say, because that would then free up, people's schedules, they could do it when, they have the most time.
Yeah.
No, and you're not dealing with a million people all at the same time.
It makes sense. And I'm not to be a naysayer, but I spent so much time on Blue Ledges doing so many things with boundary lines and trail locations and so on and so forth. If we went out there with that scope and I took my paper and my pen and I hung a flag at every place that needed to have work done, and I put number 1 here, number 2 there, 3 there. Get 10 flags out for those locations, I guarantee you within a week they'd be gone before we got any people out there to do any work. Because the users out there are so afraid of change that when they see flagging, they take it down. I mean, I wrote on there, if you're curious why this flag is here, call me with my pen.
And don't take it up. But maybe not even flag stuff, maybe just map stuff, and then you could,
Steer them there with a GPS.
have GPS points on your map, and then people can just take maps.
Too much forestry's been done in my career to know that I'm not sending them there with the GPS there.
Yeah.
I would be, and what it comes down to is you take them there yourself. You say, okay, now do this.
Well, work day here and work day there, you name a work day and go to that spot and just.
But it's a good idea to spread it out versus trying to throw everybody at it in one day.
Yeah, well, a lot of stuff too. I mean, it's very, like Scrag in general, that trail is narrow. And yeah, there's some length of section that needs to be addressed, but you can only put 2 or 3 people working in that one little spot or it's gonna get real crowded in a water bar,
Yeah.
So,
So,
We're also challenged at Scrag with regard to that's gonna be something new.
oh,
Hey, you're trying to get
there's all
rid
kinds
of
of new fun stuff.
Get rid of the old.
Yeah.
And I know, I've spent a couple days every year cutting back the brush. And the real vision would be, don't cut it back.
yeah, so I'm good on this topic from what I need.
Do you feel you need any authority to do anything, any approvals? Or you feel free to go on about doing it on your own schedules and setting up and telling us what you accomplished at our next meeting? Can we?
Barring being told otherwise, yes. Then-
Okay,
But that's why I'm surfacing it now.
let's proceed with the understanding of the entrepreneurial spirit. I will put together something and act.
Yeah.
I don't. Saturday, 5 days from now is the summer solstice. Sunday, the sun starts going the other way.
Don't
That's
tell
not
me
an
that.
accurate way to say it. But there is cause to move and not sit around and wait for 2-3 months pass.
No, I don't think that's the intent of anybody. I think that, but I think that if everybody's okay, I'm in favor of, going ahead and continuing to do the improvements that are doing. And if you can get some helpers in there, get some helpers in there. But if you're wallpapering, make sure you got somebody that knows how to wallpaper. So in other words, sending somebody up there that knows what they're supposed to be doing and they're doing it the way it's supposed to be done.
Good point.
That means you've got to have you guys there.
Very good point, Ted.
All right. Let's see here. Bruno's not here. The only thing that I noted on the accounts. There are a number of small things that are in the general budget that belong in the invasive species budget. And Bruno and I are going to meet with the town treasurer to make those changes. He created, as you'll see, a new breakdown for the invasive species, by knotweed and ash borer. So that's a new sub-account that has been created. So the town treasurer has been helping us with this, so.
Good.
There are a few.
Is that on the list that was sent out?
Yes,
Yeah, oh,
Bruno sent this around.
yeah, okay, I didn't notice the
Yeah.
change there.
Yeah.
Have them follow the previous format. I can't find any balances on that. You can manufacture one by subtracting the expenditures from the income.
Oh, and the invasive species?
Everything.
No, there's a balance.
He doesn't,
There's a balance on each, at the bottom of the last
well, there's a balance on each one that's highlighted.
the last line in each fund has a balance.
Are you sure?
With the balance.
I don't want but we're accustomed to seeing balance and a number off to the side.
So I'm showing it on my phone, but each one of these at the end has a balance. Balance, highlighted, balance, highlighted number. With the accounting, so this is the zero expense and there's the revenue adding there. I think he's got it. I'm not sure what it is that you need
It used to be off to the right, I think.
more than that, and here's the balance on that.
No, I tried that. It's not like it was before, where you could clearly see that. I'm supposed to know something about accounting, so it may be my fault, which I feel real bad about. But I found myself adding and subtracting to find the information I wanted.
Well, maybe call up Bruno and see, just discuss it with him.
Let me go home with my tail between my legs and I'll.
Take a second look at it.
I think they're okay, but yeah, I understand it, it's different than you're used to and it's hard.
Oh, yeah.
Fine.
All right.
Yeah, if you change it, can you change it back?
Okay, folks, let's move along here.
All right.
Yep.
Get out of here. Next meeting, July 21st. Anything new on Scrag?
RFP's out.
RFP's out, okay. About a month ago, we had a meeting with Gail, Bruno and I and Ito and the chair of the Northfield Conservation Commission to begin some conversations about conservation possibilities in the Northfield Range. Folks from the Land Trust and Arrowwood kind of shared with the Northfield Conservation people, the studies that have been done here that relate to the Northfield Range. So that commission is interested in having similar work done, so we can kind of look at the range together. And there was interest in the group in having, some follow-up conversations. But it was kind of well attended, and I think there was general interest in the subject.
Good.
Gail had raised previously an interest in having a GIS primer for this group. And if you're interested in that, what I was thinking, maybe for those who are interested, we could do it right before a regular meeting for anyone who was interested. We could get someone from Arrowwood to do that, or we've been working with a field naturalist graduate on the invasive species GIS system who's very savvy with it. But if you're interested, I think we could organize that, but do it as a pre-meeting. That makes sense.
Sounds good.
Or would you want to just incorporate it into a regular meeting?
No, pre-meeting, please.
No, okay. Pre-meeting, okay, all right.
Have them give us a summary, a pad of paper with a summary on how to get on and do all of this. So we will have a way of remembering it after we see the
The thing is,
presentation.
I'm not getting a degree to, because that's what you need to do,
It won't
right?
necessarily be a user.
Right.
But what you will be is someone that understands what the user is doing, what they're able to provide you.
Yeah.
Even for us dinosaurs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's an information, it's all about information, how it's displayed.
Visual display of information.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay, well, I will
Necessary.
work on setting that up.
Thank you.
Other items, really quickly, the Intervale Conservation Nursery contacted me and said they have some grant money and they'd be able to send a team out to do some stewardship work on the plantings that we've done in the 3 towns over the past couple of years.
Good.
For free. So,
Excellent.
so I'm gonna tell them yes.
Yeah.
Right?
You're not gonna tell them no?
You're right. And then Caitlin and I went out and measured that tree we've been talking about, which I thought was a hemlock. It's not a hemlock, it's a white pine. It's a white pine, but I do know the difference. But anyway, it's about 130 feet tall. The circumference is 14 and a half feet. And the crown spread, we took 2 measurements in 2 directions, the narrowest and the widest, and she's gonna average those. And then those all get conglomerated and come up with a score. And she's gonna take a look at how that would rank, on the state legacy trees.
Big tree.
The big tree.
Now, where is that located?
Well, it's near the boundary of the fairgrounds property and Hadley's property.
Okay.
It's a giant.
Swampert.
Yeah.
It's on fairground.
Pardon?
It's on fairground.
I'm not sure.
It wasn't clear. Yeah, it's not clear.
Right, yeah, Gail has seen it, yeah,
Yeah, it's big.
yeah. Yeah, it's big. So, anything else, folks?
Nope.
Good to see you all, and Kai, thanks for coming.
Thanks for letting me join.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting to see what you guys are up to and